Hi, today we're going to talk about some of the changes that have been happening in the R&D scheme and an update on where things are. I'm Samantha Wildman. I'm the Group Director here at MPA. MPA is a professional services firm who specialise in working with entrepreneurs and innovative businesses. And our aim is to really take away the things that burden those owners to allow them to concentrate on growing their business. And R&D seems to be a really big part of that. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by Sean, our Innovation Director. Sean, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sean Readiness. I'm the Innovation Director and I oversee the R&D department at MPA and everything that encompasses the R&D team. And we'll be talking to you about all the changes that have come up and what you can look forward to going forward.
Right, so I'm going to take you through the slides. There aren't many. But we're going to focus on the changes and then maybe look at some strategic planning. And I know that I'll have I know you know what it should be coming up, but I always have some extra questions that I'd like to throw in as well. So let's start with a quick recap of the changes. And I think most of you are aware of these. I think when you go back and look at the statistics that come out from HMRC, and remember that they are showing statistics that are a year or so behind, what we're starting to see now is the number of R&D claims is reducing. And I think that's what HMRC were trying to achieve. But what I found quite surprising is the value of the claims is increasing. The average claim value has increased. And the overall value of claims has only gone down by 2%. And I think they've taken out well over 30% of claims, especially new claimants. So it proves that HMRC's goal of making this a scheme designed to support those that are doing true high value R&D is working. So that is good. Out of the changes that you see there, Sean, I suppose the merging of the two schemes, the SME and RDEC, what have you noticed from those two schemes coming together?
Initially, we noticed a bit of hesitancy from some clients that those that would have been in the SME scheme, and as the uplift is reduced year on year, now it's taking the total value of what they spend is, that their first response to what the merge scheme is, oh, maybe this isn't as good as what it has been in the past. That ultimately isn't always the case, and in many cases they do seem to have far more benefits from being in the merge scheme, and that isn't always true for everybody, but it's one thing to factor in. Across the board though, it now drives consistency, which is what we haven't had for years.
Yeah.
So going forward year on year, every company knows what's capable and what isn't. The scheme itself in terms of eligibility hasn't changed, but what can and can't be included it's now got to a point where these are the rules and this is how it's going to be applied year on year going forward. So having that consistent approach and knowing exactly what their claim can look like allows companies to model their business and look further ahead instead of having to really try and take nuances into consideration.
We had a year or so, didn't we, where we were speaking to a lot of clients about what would have worked previously, doesn't work now. Yeah. But I think we're finding that most clients now are through that process, so it's the same.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest talking points from the changes, and I was at an event yesterday with innovators and entrepreneurs, and I talked about the advanced notification form, and I had so many people that came up to me afterwards saying, I think I've lost the chance to claim. So, and I know on a day-to-day basis in the office here, we're still having those sort of conversations. Do you want to take us through the advanced notification form and the deadlines?
Yeah, so you can't escape the advanced notification form, no matter how long you've been part of a scheme or if you're new to it. You rightly said there's a number of companies we speak to, and especially those that have started and never claimed before, they think that they've got this element to a position where they can now start to benefit from the R&D scheme, only to find out that they've missed the opportunity due to the advanced notification form. So the process is for anyone who's never claimed, anyone who hasn't claimed for 3 years, or how you submitted your last R&D claim. And now that can get quite convoluted and tricky, but the reality is that going forward, everyone has to do it. pretty much, unless you're filing by an original submission after your as part of your tax computation. Now, our advice would be to always engage with us as early as possible. The window of opportunity to submit the advanced notification form is from day one of the accounting period to 6 months past your year end. That does take into account if the claim period is shorter or longer as well. But once you've gone a day over that window, you've lost the opportunity to claim. And it's really important that you do. And what's worse is that there's not much to it, to be completely honest. It's a form with a bit of company information that you'd have generic company information, then a high level overview about what projects you were looking to undertake in that financial period or what projects you have undertaken. And that only really needs to be a couple of paragraphs. But taking the time to do that and speak with us, and we will submit it on your behalf and put the form together. It's a half-hour conversation at max.
And if you submit a form, but then maybe you make a business decision that claiming isn't appropriate, do you still have to put a claim in?
No, you absolutely do not. And for those companies that submit the form really early in their financial periods, if those projects don't really materialise and you go on to something else, you can look to claim for them as well. But the premise is you have to submit the form.
And that form is given a flavour of the R&D that you have done in that period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. HMRC touched on it being used for upline compliance, but as of yet, we haven't seen any indication of that.
Okay, that's interesting. I think one of the things that they're also trying to achieve with this is they want to stop R&D being an accidental event, and they want it to be far more strategic in your planning. So they want you to, and you're going to touch on later on about some of the information that you need to record over a period of time, but they want you to be able to think, R&D, I do R&D, therefore I should be able to tell you at the end of my financial year what I've done and what I might be able to claim for. So yes, I can't stress enough. It is horrible when I speak to a client and they say to me, I've done some really good R&D, I've been collecting the evidence, there's been so much going on in the business, I'm now ready to claim. I've got a claim for 24, 25, but I'm a March year end, and I have to turn around and say, you've got no claim at all for those 2 months of the year.
Well, I should say for internal processes, for companies that work with us for years, we're talking about the year prior R&D claim and having that technical meeting and conversations, we can just extract that data at that point. It doesn't then have to be another process as well. So just embed it into conversations we're already having to make it less onerous on you. Plus, we would be getting that information far earlier as well. It's far early prior to the deadline. It's far more flexibility to get it done in time.
And I know we're trying to get them all done within 3 months of the year end.
Yeah.
Because we all hate having to be stuck there on the last day, trying to get things in, signed off and approved, and then making sure that HMRC systems are all still up, that we can get them submitted. So yeah, let's just try and get those done as early as possible. One of the other main areas of conversation is compliance. And there's been a lot of changes with how HMRC have been handling compliance. Some very good, some still not quite as good. Can you take me through what you are seeing and what people could be doing to prepare for compliance?
So what we're seeing from HMRC is a different approach to what we saw 18 months, 2 years ago. It's now far more of a collaborative approach and more conversations in place when you're going through the inquiry process. They seem to be far more understanding of the information that's been provided, as opposed to when they first went incredibly compliant heavy. They just dismissed any reasonable information that's provided to them, and that put a lot of people off and made people very nervous about engagement within the R&D scheme. And now we're seeing people that have gone through that, or aware of companies that have gone through that, and they don't feel the same way anymore. They're far more open to submitting a claim and not scared of going through the inquiry process, because so many companies are successfully defending their claim because they have all the evidence and the right information to support. And that's really the most important bit. That when an inquiry, if an inquiry was to occur, you have to be able to substantiate everything you put into that claim. And that by that we mean invoices, contracts, purchase orders. If you have that information, HMRC will look upon that claim far more favourably than if there's gaps within the information provided. Now, if that part is all well and good, the benchmarking of information or benchmarking what the claim against is also really vitally important. And we have to be able to demonstrate that you were aware what the current capabilities were and limitations at the time. If that's evolved, like it does in some industries very quickly, that's been taken into consideration throughout the year. Now, that's not a scary thought because the competent professionals that lead these projects are very aware of that anyway. It's kind of their BAUs, business best business practices. So just us having those conversations and documenting that as we go through makes it a much easier process.
And I suppose if you are claiming quite far after your year end, and a lot of industries, you say that technology ramps up really quickly, HMRC are going to be benchmarking that against what they see today.
Yeah.
And that could then be saying, well, actually, your technology looks like it was already out there.
Yeah, and that's the hard part because, I mean, if you look at IT and AI, it's ever evolving, and what's not capable today will possibly be capable in a month's time. And it's really making sure that you're aware of that and you can evidence that. And we've got examples of companies that were going through, put together their project and had to pivot partway through the year because someone else beat them to market within a different sector, within the sector they were operating in. And then that ultimately the baseline, what they're benchmarking against has changed. But it's still claimable because it was still R&D beforehand and it's still R&D after. You're just now trying to build upon a different baseline. But people shouldn't be told by that because people do know that. People are very aware what's going on. They're not going to do the work and they don't need to do it.
Yeah.
There's something out there. So, yeah, it's far more favourable. People and companies that are going into it are far more open and feel safer knowing that it's going to be a fair process, which arguably hasn't been in the past.
And I know when HMRC started all the heavy production line compliance, you and the team were all sitting there pulling your hair out. But now it seems to be a lot easier. What's changed from HMRC's point of view? How are you communicating with them now?
What has changed is the frequency of communication seems to have improved. We've gone in the past waiting several months for a boilerplate letter to come back. Now we're seeing far more frequent responses, but the letters that they're providing have really taken into consideration the information that's been provided. So they're actually asking questions about information that's been provided, and there's an eagerness to really understand what that company's undertaken. So that's been a big shift. And what we're also seeing is the type of questions that they're asking as well, that they're focused, as we mentioned on previous webinars, they're focused on consumer materials. That all kind of falls back to if you've got the evidence to support the cost in the claim, and if you can substantiate that, then generally they're happy. That's all fine. And we found that when they focus on a specific area of the claim, if you satisfy that, then they'll leave the rest of the claim alone. And that's what we've seen. So they might focus on different areas as we go through, but we haven't seen anything shift drastically at the minute. But we'll be aware. We'll keep tabs on it and updates in due course.
I think because it's not a boilerplate response to everything and it's site specific, a year or so ago you'd have to go through your 5 different levels of responses before you got a conclusion. But now I'm seeing from the team that the first or second response, they've been able to justify what HMRC has asked for.
Yeah, and that all boils down to HMRC really wanting to understand the business and what the projects are about, but also the company being able to substantiate information that's been provided. And the more that we can provide in the first instance, much quicker the process will be for everybody.
And I think what we've seen now is, is HMRC and the strategy around R&D is around having people collecting more information and maybe being a bit more proactive with the R&D. And I know you put together a little timeline. It might be hard to see on the screen, but do you want to take us through what you see a good claim process looking like?
Yeah. So An R&D project can span multiple years or can start and finish within the same year. And what's really important is being aware of when these projects are happening and what costs associated to those projects the company's bearing as well, and tracking that information and capturing it as you go through the financial period. It's really important to have reviews because the project may go in a different direction, it may span off into different work streams that ultimately the finance lead might not be aware of, and they may not be capturing all the costs associated to that project. And it's really just making sure that you're reviewing, that you're happy with the information you've got, and that the project's still continuing throughout the year. And if companies want to send information in piecemeal for us throughout the year and we can start piecing together the claim, then we can. But ultimately, the best practice is for companies to really just be thinking ahead of what they need to be capturing and what they need to be preparing for the R&D claim, because as you mentioned about the advanced notification form, having that information during the financial year as well, we can leverage that to do the notification form as well.
I think one of the things that I see when I speak to clients is, we need to have a lot more information now. It does take longer in time, but I think what I'm seeing is those clients that maybe are leading with the financial side of things are able to understand easier what projects you need to talk about, and that makes the process seem to be a lot quicker and smoother.
Yeah, we've mentioned in the past that as part of the online portal that every company has to submit the R&D claim. There's a 50% threshold for the number of projects that need to be written up, and ultimately it's a minimum of 3 if there's 3 or more. But knowing the value associated to that project means we know exactly what projects need to be documented, and ultimately speeds up the entire process. And unfortunately, many companies went through the pain of doing it the older way. Now that is a much quicker process. We have the costs up front. That bit can really just kind of trickle through quite quickly, which is good.
So later on, we're going to talk about some subcontractors, but again, when I look at the claims and I see what maybe is holding things up, getting PAYE reference for EPWs.
Yeah, that's really important. So we'll touch on elements of the costs which are eligible, which aren't. But when you've got a UK externally provided work, and you have to be able to provide a PAYE reference. If we can't provide that, then that cost can't be included in the claim.
So again, looking at your R&D strategically, again, from what I'm seeing is those clients who are maybe engaging with those subcontractors and asking for that information up front, they'll know if they can include that cost in the claim early.
Yeah, and also if they know that they don't have that information, then they may look to utilise a different third-party contractor to make sure that they can claim that cost back. And for many people that will be listening to this, the contractors that they use ones that they've developed relationships over years. So having that information once, it's then repeatable information. You don't have to keep going through that year on year.
This is going to be talking about what can be included in a claim and what can't be included in a claim. So we start with overseas costs.
So overseas costs has really been a bit of a bugbear for many companies now. HMRC have introduced that R&D must be undertaken within the UK, unless it's wholly unreasonable for those conditions not to be replicated.
And what would that be?
It could be if you need a certain demographic of a person for a test. It could be tested environments, it could be wind farms, it could be something that you need a bit of sand out of a specific desert, then you might be able to argue that.
So when can't you include it?
Pretty much every other time, to be completely honest. If it was an IT company, if you haven't got the required level of expertise in a specific area in the UK, but someone outside of the UK does have it, doesn't mean that it can qualify. It's just because someone in the UK is in the required skill set doesn't mean that it's wholly unreasonable for someone not to be upskilled, unfortunately. It's a real bugbear, and it has impacted some companies to the point where they can't claim anymore. Other companies have taken the decision to pivot and look to bring the UK and outsource their costs to the UK, and others have just taken it on the chin because it's the best thing for their business, and they're just going to keep using the model that they're using. So it's unfortunate, but That's what HMRC have applied.
Yeah, and I've sat down with clients and we've gone through and, you know, bringing some of those people into the UK, one, if they could find the resource, but two, the costs.
Yeah.
And what they would save by on the R&D doesn't bridge the gap between the additional spend. I suppose we see some that sort of have a joint team. They may have the project leads in the UK, and they tend to be quite expensive people.
Mm-hmm.
And then they may have some other people that are doing the work overseas. So there is a balance between having some here and overseas. Minimum threshold. There isn't one at the moment, is there?
No, there isn't one, but there's talk of reintroducing one. Now, what does that look like? Well, that's what minimum threshold going to be. We're not entirely sure. Previously, it was 50,000, and that's qualifying expenditure before any uplift was applied to that cost. Then it was reduced to 25,000, and then it's no longer in existence. But there's talk of reintroducing that, and probably would go hand in hand with, although the volume of claims being submitted are going down, but the value of the claims are going up. That would align with that. HMRC have looked to move towards the large company scheme with the merge schemes, so that would go hand in hand with that as well. At this moment in time, it's not in play, but we do know HMRC are discussing it and actively looking at it. So it's always something to bear in mind that if you think you've got relatively low spend, does that incur any additional risk to you submitting a claim? And from our perspective, it would boil down to real eligibility and is it genuine R&D? And if it is, then you should be maximising the claim whilst you're entitled to it. And that's irrespective of cost. If we didn't think it was strong to substantiate an inquiry, then we would never pursue it anyway.
And I suppose there's the time element of putting a claim together versus what you're going to get back out of it.
Yeah, especially now, some of it might need to obtain a little bit more information, depending on whether it's the first time you've been through it or not. So you really have to weigh that up as well.
And I suppose for HMRC's justification is because they're looking at you to advance technology, and to be able to advance technology, you can't do that cheaply.
No.
And I know some businesses are. I was speaking to some people yesterday who are doing it on a shoestring, and because there's no money coming in, but they're doing genuine, really good R&D. But those people have always been the ones that lose out from the scheme anyway, because most people are not paying themselves anything.
That's always been a problem. So really, going back to your point about identifying the costs up front, if you know how much money you spent on a project or multiple projects, this is an easier conversation to have. So you know, do you want to go down that road of getting more information in, but if you know really this is what our claim looks like, this is what we could get back, is it worth the effort, then that's a much easier point.
Right, excellent. I was labouring on that because now you're going to talk about subcontracted and subsidised R&D, and this is complicated.
Yeah.
So take us through it, Sean.
So this was reintroduced, came up again in February earlier this year. It was on the back of some first-tier tribunals that HMRC had lost. And what the crux of those tribunals based upon was who owns the R&D, was the claimant company being subcontracted to undertake the R&D on behalf of somebody else, and ultimately their costs being subsidised. And now what HMRC have done is align with what our opinion has always been and what other practices within the industry has always been as well, is that who's undertaking the R&D, who's managing the R&D, who owns any IP from the output of it, who bears any of the financial risk, and really who is ultimately responsible for determining that this is a research and development project as opposed to just a piece of work in itself. Now, as an example, one of these tribunals was that there were contracts in place to undertake development or to provide goods and services, but as part of that, R&D had to take place to be able the company to meet the terms of that agreement. Now, the company who they were in contract with had no idea that R&D was being undertaken. They were ultimately weren't interested. All they wanted to ensure was that the piece of work that they've engaged this company for to fulfil was met, and how they go about that, they don't care. So the first tier tribunal ruled in favour of the claimant, saying that the customer had no idea that R&D has been undertaken. Ultimately, they didn't care. You managed it. you owned it, it's your R&D, therefore you should be able to claim that back. Now, many companies, this becomes very interesting, and a lot of companies this impact, and it does fall down to contracts as well, because we've seen it in inquiry cases. There's ultimately contracts in place that span multiple years. If there's no mention of any research and development being undertaken in a contract, that's always a fantastic sign. We know that many companies engage with customers that span many years, and the contracts were signed several years ago bear no relevance to the work that's being undertaken today. That's also can be a very good point as well, but successfully defending the claim and submitting one. But really, the point I'd always focus on is that who's the competent professionals leading the project? Is it the customers, the competent professionals directing you, or do you have them in your business? And therefore, you're the one managing that project through. You're the one directing where which should go. You're the ones ultimately taking all the risks to ensure that you're meeting in terms of those contracts.
So I'm right, it is confusing. And I suppose my takeaway from that is, if in doubt, check it out.
Yeah.
And I would most probably look at doing that before you agree or go into contract with somebody as well. If you believe that there's going to be a significant part of R&D for you and a significant risk, then let's help you check that out with your client beforehand. We're running out of time. We could be here all day if we were allowed, but they won't let us. So I think these are the top takeaways. If you had to choose one, Sean, what's your top takeaway from these be?
Mine would be always plan ahead, and that's with your costs, your record keeping, keeping track of everything that you're either spending or you're undertaking on the project and the direction of the project. That will then allow you, if you put accurate planning, to ensure that you're doing the advanced application form in time and providing that information, and just use it as an ongoing process and best practice going forward, because this isn't an onerous process. It's people get put off by it. It's reoccurring. It's the same information generally year on year. So just having a process in place that suits you and your business makes this much easier.
Brilliant. The budgets next week. I don't think we're expecting there to be any major changes to the R&D scheme. There's a few areas of speculation, maybe around the R&D intensive, because I think the pool for that is getting smaller and smaller. So maybe again a bit more help there for those companies that would have normally been eligible for that. But we are holding another sort of webinar on the 4th of December that is covering succession planning. So we know that that's going to be something that comes out of the budget, but it will also have a bit of an overview on anything else that we feel is relevant to our clients and any effect that from the R&D scheme or any other similar schemes like Patent Box or anything like that. Thank you everybody for watching. I do hope you found that useful. Now, if there's anything there that you want to learn more about, then please do make contact. You can get hold of me at samantha.wildman@npa.co.uk.